Hi, it's Chad with Heirloom Farm and Forge, and today we're going to make a queen castle mating nuke. It's like a threeplex for bees. Going to graft some queens here in a couple of weekends, and I need mating nukes for them so the queens can go on their mating flight. So let's get to it. So I've ordered a deep hive body. I measured out and divided these in thirds. I'll put my square on here. And mark these out. And I'm going to run the table saw down these lines to make a groove for the divider board to go into. So let's get to it. First we're going to set our table saw where it is right on one of these lines for the distance away from the fence. Where it's exactly in the center of that mark. Now we're going to run this through. Actually, we're going to set the depth at the same depth as this frame rest. So, pretty easy to do that. Just set that on the frame rest and crank the blade down, then crank it back up until I feel it hit the wood. And then I know it's at the right depth. And yes, I know I should use a cross-cut fence for this, but since we're only cutting like 9 inches or so, I think it'll be just fine. I get some safety glasses. Here we go. There's one. These should be the same. Now I've got grooves in my ends. Make sure you cut these in the ends and not on the sides, of course. I'm going to temporarily put my box together so I can make sure everything lines up good. Make sure I get these divider boards where they need to be. Now I'm going to mark where my grooves are so that I can put bottom boards for the dividers to land on, to set on. I'm going to measure these, see how long they need to be. 15 inches exactly. I got a piece of 3/4 board and I am just going to mark this thing at 15 inches. And then I'll rip the pieces out of that. We're just going to make these about 3/4 of an inch. Doesn't have to be exact. I'm going to cut a couple of end pieces at 13 1/4. And those are going to go on the ends here. Now we're going to go in the knife shop because it is hot out here. And since my workbench is a total disaster, I'm going to use my son's little workbench. It works. And I'm going to toenail some staples in there. Hopefully without shooting them in my hand. Yeah, that didn't work very good. Maybe it'll work like this. really just holding it in there while the glue dries. I had to knock these down with the belt sander a little bit to make them flush, but I got them pretty close now. So we're going to shoot a couple staples in them. We're going to have to cut some holes in these and put another layer of screen on this to make it a double screen board. So what you want to measure in order to get your divider boards correct, you would measure, well, we can flip this around. We'd measure all the way from the bottom here to the top of this, and we have 10 1/4, and then we're going to add 3/4 for the inner covers. So that makes 11. So we're going to cut our slats 11 by, yeah, I'll have to put the box back together to get the exact length. I better make sure that my divider boards will fit in these grooves, because if I have to cut them again to make this like a double kerf wide or something, I don't want to put this box all together and then have to take it back apart to be able to cut these on the table saw. So it's a good thing I tried that, because they wouldn't quite fit in these slots. So I moved the table saw fence just a little bit and made these wide enough for my divider to fit in. So let's put this box together. Okay. And on this end, we're going to make a little feeder system. Might have to make that landing board bigger. Well, what used to be a landing board. I might have to make that bigger in order to hold quart jars. Yeah, I'm definitely going to have to make that bigger. Okay, we're back at this queen castle. So these aren't nailed in place, but I cut a piece of a 2x4 to bring this out to where it needs to be, because I'm gonna make a feeder in the front with quart jars, and this landing board was not enough for that, not big enough for that. So what I'm gonna do, cut these little pieces to also extend this out. And then our inboard there. And so I got to put dividers here also. Like the queen can't just come out into the feeder and then go over to the next one. So what I did was I measured this here, and that's 3.5. But then I also have to add this 3/8 of an inch here, or there would be a gap that they could get over to the next one. So that makes it 3 7/8. I gotta cut these dividers here. So got these cut 3 7/8, and I'm gonna put everything in here, put it together temporarily to make sure everything fits before I start nailing and screwing things together. Okay, now I'm going to screw this board on the front directly through here, but if I just tried to screw it on, the screws would just barely reach. So I'm going to drill about halfway through this thing, and so the screws would catch really good. Kind of countersink them. That thing's pretty strong. Okay. So there's that. Now I need to put the top on this and cut my holes for my quart jars to sit in. So that's going to be 4 1/4 by 1/4. 4 1/4 by 16 1/4. Okay, got my piece cut for that. And we're going to mark where our holes are. Going to go for our quart jars. Okay, and then I've got a 3/4 piece at the end that I have to miss. So I'll mark out 3/4 across there. Make sure I don't hit on that. So then we can take our jar lid, center that up, and mark it around it. I don't have the right hole saw for this. This one's too small. This one's too big. So I'm just gonna cut it with a jigsaw. If I was making a bunch of these, I would definitely get the right size hole saw. And but since I want to get this done and I'm only cutting 3 holes, I'll just use a jigsaw. We'll check it, make sure it sits in there. Sits in there perfectly. So I just realized I made a little mistake. This little spacer board that I put in here, I had already sanded that thing down to make it come out flush with this, but then these were full 3/4 of an inch. So kind of messed up a little bit there, but that's all right. I'll just fill it up with caulking. There, like it never happened. Cut, cuss, do your best. Let paint and caulking do the rest. Okay, so now I almost forgot to make this a double screen board. I need to put some 1/8 inch hardware cloth on here. All right, now we just have to cut our dividers to go in here. And remember, we're going to make them 3/4 of an inch taller. So they're going to be 11 by 19 1/8. All right, got some of this masonite and cut it. See if it fits. Oh yeah, I forgot something. I gotta notch out my board underneath. So it's hitting on this board, and so yeah, I have to notch that out to match this notch here for that to slide all the way down. I gotta figure out how to do that. Okay, I think I know what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna use one of these oscillating tools, plunge router, multi-tool, whatever you want to call it. But that'll allow me to cut straight down. I could just notch the corner out of one of these boards and then just have to make sure I put it in the same way every time. But I think I want to do it this way. Let's try again. All right, now we just gotta cut the inner covers that fit in there. Luckily, two sides of that are 5.5 wide, and I happen to have some 1x6, which is 5.5 wide. So all I have to do is cut them to length at 20 inches. Now the middle one is smaller at 4 3/4 wide because it doesn't hang over the edge like the others. And so I'm gonna have to rip it on the table saw. I'm gonna mark that middle one because I'll always be trying to put it in the wrong spot. So I'm just gonna put a big M on that one for middle, or W if you're looking at it the other way. That comes out really flush. Our quart jars fit in here. I guess I'll build a little cover for each one to plug up these holes if we're not feeding them. Then I'll just take a regular telescoping top cover and put it on the top. Be good to go. Almost forgot. We really ought to give the beads a way to get in and out of this thing. So what I'm going to do is just notch one on each side and one in the middle back here. This is the feeder side, so you can't do anything here. And we'll use our aforementioned plunge router. And we want to cut pretty small entrances because these are just going to be mating nukes. They're only going to have like, 2 or 3 frames of bees in there. And so they need a small entrance so they can defend it easily. Then I'm just going to take a chisel and chisel this thing out. I know this is a metal chisel, but I'm kind of a metal worker. So all right, now we have entrances. Now for the little plugs for when you're not feeding, need something to cover up these holes. So I just took some scrap 1x4s, which are 3.5, which is exactly what we need here, and cut them to 3.5 squared. And so we'll just line them up with these. Shoot a staple in it and make sure it's going to sit in there. I just took the pieces that I cut out of the holes to help keep this from, sliding off or whatever. So they just sit in there perfectly. Of course, you got to use the right hole for the right one, and you got to get this pretty centered and straight on that. had lines on them from when I originally drew to center them, so I know which way is straight. And so I can feel around this and line this up. Make sure they're all gonna fit, and I'll shoot some more staples in them. I think I'm gonna mark these on the back. It's gonna be the same way. They probably won't interchange with each other. Nope. Okay, so this is gonna be, we're gonna say right. Got an R, middle, and left. Although this is probably technically the back side. It don't matter. I'll know what it means. Put on the old nasty inner cover that I had laying around. Quart jar. I think that's all. Besides painting it. But I might end up using it before I get it painted, at least this year. Anyway, this is the Queen Castle, at least my version of the Queen Castle, and I think it's going to work out real nice. Never grafted queens before, but I'm going to do it this year, so stay tuned for upcoming videos of my first time grafting for queens. Thanks for watching.